December 3rd, 2024, 10:27 p.m., Seoul, South Korea. While most of the country was asleep, their president walked onto national television and said 6 words that would send shockwaves through every boardroom, every trading floor, and every household in one of Asia's most powerful economies. He declared martial law. For the first time in 44 years, South Korea, a country the world trusted as a pillar of modern democracy, was placed under military rule. Within minutes, armed soldiers surrounded the National Assembly. Helicopters circled overhead. Citizens ran toward Parliament in the freezing December night, not knowing if there would be a war. And while the world watched a political crisis unfold, Korea's economy was quietly beginning to collapse. This is not a story about politics. This is the story of what one man's decision did to the companies, the currency, and the economic future of an entire nation. This is the business cost of the worst decision in modern Korean history. Welcome to Korean Power Network, documentary explorations of Korean industry, power, and ambition. At exactly 10:27 p.m., the moment Yoon made his announcement, financial markets that were still open, particularly in the United States and London, reacted within seconds. The iShares MSCI South Korea ETF, which tracks over 90 of Korea's biggest companies, crashed 7% in a matter of minutes, hitting a 52-week low. Samsung's UK-listed shares dropped 7%. Coupang, Korea's largest online retailer, plunged 6%. POSCO, the nation's leading steelmaker, fell 5%. The Korean won collapsed to 1,443 per US dollar, its weakest level since October 2022. In currency markets, a 3% single-night move on a major economy's currency is not normal. It signals panic, but the most shocking number wasn't the stock price or the currency. It was the timestamp. Because by 1:02 a.m., just 2.5 hours after Yoon's declaration, 190 lawmakers had physically forced their way past soldiers, climbed over barricades, and voted unanimously to lift martial law. By 4:30 in the morning, Yoon lifted the decree. The entire thing, from declaration to collapse, lasted 6 hours. But 6 hours was enough. The damage was done, and it was only beginning. To understand why one night could shake an entire economy, you need to understand something investors had been whispering about for years. Something called the Korea discount. South Korea's stock market, the KOSP, was already trading at just 0.8 times its estimated book value. In plain English, that means global investors valued Korea's companies at less than what they were actually worth on paper. For comparison, the global MSCI World Index trades at nearly 3 times book value. Why? Because investors didn't fully trust the system. The concentration of power inside Korea's chaebol families, the complex cross-shareholding structures, the political interference in business decisions. These were all red flags that kept Korea's market chronically undervalued, even in good times. And 2024 was not good times. The KOSPI was already down 14% from its July peak, before the martial law declaration even happened. GDP grew just 0.1% in the July to September quarter. Industrial production fell for 3 consecutive months, heading into December. Yoon had actually spent much of his presidency trying to fix this. He had launched what he called the Corporate Value Up program, a plan to make Korean companies more transparent and accountable to shareholders, to finally erase the Korea discount and attract serious foreign investment. In one night, he destroyed everything he had built. Because the one thing investors fear more than undervaluation is unpredictability. And nothing says unpredictable like a president deploying soldiers against his own parliament. When the markets opened on the morning of December 4th, the damage rolled through Korea's biggest companies like a tremor. Samsung Electronics, the single most important company in Korea's economy, responsible for roughly 20% of the nation's total exports, saw its shares drop. SK Hynix, the world's leading producer of the AI chip that Nvidia depends on, fell. LG Energy Solution, which powers electric vehicles from General Motors to Volkswagen, dropped 2.8%. Hyundai Motor fell 2.4%. These were not companies with problems. These were among the most strategically important corporations on Earth, and they were being punished, not for anything they did, but because one man made a decision without telling even his own prime minister. The Bank of Korea moved fast, called an emergency board meeting before the markets even opened, and announced unlimited liquidity support. The government declared it was ready to deploy 10 trillion Korean won, approximately $7 billion to stabilize the stock market at any time. But money can stop a bleeding market. It cannot restore trust. And trust between Korea and its foreign investors was now fractured in a way that would take years, not days, to repair. In December 2024, South Korea lost 52,000 jobs in a single month, the first year-on-year employment decline in nearly 4 years. Consumer confidence, which had already been weakening, collapsed. The Business Survey Index of Korea's top 1,500 manufacturing companies fell from 95 to 88. Any reading below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Korean businesses, the companies that export semiconductors to Nvidia, batteries to General Motors, and ships to the world, had lost confidence in their own country. The KOSPI ended 2024 down 9.6% for the full year. And when global institutions began revising their growth forecasts, the numbers were stark. Before December 3rd, the OECD had projected Korea's economy would grow 2.1% in 2025. After the martial law crisis, that forecast was cut. Then, cut again and again. The final reality, Korea grew just 1% in 2025. The OECD called it the second largest growth downgrade among all major economies, behind only the United States. The first quarter of 2025 saw the economy contract by 0.2%. Private consumption fell, fixed investment declined, construction investment collapsed 9.8% for the full year, and the Korean won, it didn't recover to pre-martial law levels until late May 2025, 5 months after that single night. And through all of this, the chaos, the impeachment proceedings, the revolving door of acting presidents, Samsung still had chips to ship, Hyundai still had cars to build, SK Hynix still had the world's most advanced AI memory to deliver. The companies didn't break, but the country that built them was paying a price it hadn't chosen to pay. Yoon Suk Yeol was impeached by the National Assembly on December 14th, just 11 days after the declaration. On April 4th, 2025, the Constitutional Court upheld his removal in a unanimous 8-0 ruling. He was permanently removed from office, but the story did not end there. In February 2026, 443 days after that night, a South Korean court sentenced Yoon Suk Yeol to life in prison, convicted of leading an insurrection. The court found that his decision to send troops to the National Assembly to stop lawmakers from voting was a direct attack on South Korea's constitutional order. The economy, meanwhile, began to recover. A snap election in June 2025 brought a new president. 2 stimulus packages, totaling 30 trillion Korean won, were approved. Consumer confidence slowly returned. By the second half of 2025, GDP was growing again. But analysts and economists have been clear. The damage is not erased. Business confidence remains fragile. The Korea discount has deepened, and the question that investors, multinationals, and trading partners are now asking about South Korea is one they never had to ask before December 3rd, 2024. Can they trust the system? South Korea remains one of the most extraordinary economic stories in human history. A country that had a GDP per capita of $64 in 1955. A country that built Samsung, Hyundai, SK Hynix from nothing. A country that now sits at the center of the global AI chip revolution. But history has a way of reminding even the most powerful economies that trust, once lost, is the hardest thing to rebuild. Harder than building a semiconductor, harder than designing a car, harder than any engineering challenge any chaebol has ever faced. And in 6 hours, on a December night in Seoul, one man reminded the world of that.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got